All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Village Board meeting to order on Monday, April 17, 2023. We're very honored and pleased to be joined this evening by Boy and Girl Scouts from Troop 32, chartered by First Presbyterian Church here in Arlington Heights. And if I could take just a minute to read all the names of the individuals who've joined us tonight. They're here with their leaders. On the boys' side, Scoutmaster Peter McLeod and Patrick O'Donnell. And on the girls' side, Nick Lopazinski and Rebecca Wilhelm. And the scouts who are with us tonight, Dylan Ferguson, Patrick Karafodius, Henry Lopazinski, Declan McLeod, Nora O'Donnell, Jacob Papierski, Eleanor Prosperi, Gianni Scaletta, Gavin Wakefield, Wyatt Wakefield, Zach Walter, Elise Wilhelm, Tyler McPherson, and Oscar Nowak. So, Gianni, if you take it away.
Will the audience please rise for the presentation of the colors? Color guard attention. Color guard forward march. Color guard halt. Color guard present the colors. Color guard post the colors. Scout salute. Will the audience, those not in uniform, please place your right hand over your heart. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color guard return to ranks. Color guard about face. Forward march. Color guard halt. Color dismiss. Audience, please be seated.
Let's give them a big round of applause. Well, thank you, Troop 32, for starting our meeting off right here this evening. Thanks again. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
Trustee Canty.
For the last time, here.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Here.
Trustee Bertucci.
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
Trustee Grasse.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
Trustee Baldino.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and we just have one set of minutes to approve tonight. That's from our Village Board meeting of April 3rd, 2023. Are there any changes or passes? Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of April 3rd, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Canty, second by Trustee Schwingbeck. Any comments from the board or from the audience?
I have to pass.
Passed by Trustee Bertucci, sorry.
That's right.
Anything from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next, we move on to the approval of the accounts payable, and I call on Trustee Bertucci.
I'll move approval of the warrant register for the check date 4/15/2023 in the amount of $2,060,185.29.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Bertucci, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? If not, roll call.
Trustee Bertucci.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Grasse.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, next we move on to recognitions and presentations, and we have some very special people to recognize here this evening. Outgoing/retiring trustees, Mary Beth Canty and Trustee John Scaletta. So first, Mary Beth, if you join me up front. Well, Mary Beth Canty has been an outstanding trustee for 4 years now, and She is a dedicated public servant. I'm very much looking forward to working with you, Mary Beth, in your new role as state representative down in Springfield. We know you're going to be a good friend to the Village of Arlington Heights in your new capacity, and I know you're going to do a great job down there. Mary Beth has brought many things to this village board over the past 4 years. She's really brought a great deal of diversity in many different ways, including diversity of thought. And I want to thank you, Mary Beth, for bringing my 1950s mentality into at least the 1960s. And so, yeah, and, you know, Mary Beth and I, you know, she said, other people have said that we don't always agree. But as I was running the other morning, I was thinking over the course of 4 years of votes, we've actually voted the same way well over 90% of the time. And so that's because we really have the same philosophy in terms of the health, safety, and welfare of this village, looking out for the people that we represent. And I just can't thank you enough for your 4 years of service to the community and to the Village of Arlington Heights. And I know you're going to do great things in the future. So let me read this proclamation. I got the wrong one. There you go. Yeah. This is a Village of Arlington Heights proclamation recognizing trustee Mary Beth Canty for her 4 years as trustee with the Village of Arlington Heights. Whereas trustee Mary Beth Canty was elected to the Arlington Heights Village Board in 2019. Trustee Canty has been an active member of the community for many years, serving as a member of the League of Women Voters, the Bridging the Black-White Divide Education Task Force, and the District 25 Parent-Teacher Association. And whereas trustee Canty will continue to serve and represent the Village of Arlington Heights as a member of the Illinois House of Representatives, representing the 54th District following her election in November 2022. Whereas trustee Canty has served the public with transparency, thoughtfulness, compassion, and fairness, always working to ensure that all perspectives were heard in public policy discussions. Whereas during her tenure on the village board, trustee Canty was an advocate for promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion within village government by encouraging a broad cross-section of the community to serve on village boards and commissions, and by encouraging village government to find new and creative ways to seek out, engage with, and respond to the many diverse voices within the Arlington Heights community. Now, therefore, I, Thomas W. Hayes, along with the Village Board of Trustees, do hereby recognize and congratulate trustee Mary Beth Canty for her many contributions to the Village of Arlington Heights as both village trustee and dedicated community leader. Although we know her efforts on behalf of others will continue on, her time on the village board will be remembered and valued by all. So congratulations, Mary Beth. We also have some other tokens. Let me make sure I get the right one. This is something to put on your mantle or your bookshelf, either at home or down in Springfield. And it's a very special remembrance of your time here on the village board. It says, Mary Beth Canty, 2019 to 2023, in appreciation of your dedicated service to the citizens of Arlington Heights as village trustee. So congratulations again. And then we have one other thing, and this is just to enjoy some time off, hopefully with your family, at your favorite restaurant. And so congratulations again. So now, and again, you're not limited to 3 minutes, and so.
I will try and do it in 3 minutes.
All right,
so.
please.
So thank you for those kind words, and I know sometimes it has seemed like maybe we've challenged each other, but I appreciate that you can take that with a sense of humor and know the spirit in which it was intended. Because what I've learned in being on this board is how much every member of this board cares so very deeply about the people of this community and how hard they work to make sure that they are transparent with everybody that is out there, even when we don't agree on how we should get there. And we don't always, but I do believe that we find our way to what is right for the community. So I am looking out at my daughter who was here when I was sworn in 2019, and she's a little bit older now and a little bit wiser, and my husband, and so many of you that have helped me learn and grow and become the leader that I think I am becoming today. And I am so appreciative of everything that you've done, the advice that you've given, the time that you've taken to answer questions, to throw out suggestions. It's incredibly meaningful, and I hope that those things do not stop just because I am no longer on this board. I might be able to do something else down in Springfield, though I might not be able to help with any complaints about the Groot contract, should that come up. That's going to have to be one of these folks. But I can help in a lot of other ways, and I look forward to being able to do that. So thank you for letting me have the privilege and the honor of serving my community in this way, and thank you for supporting me as I move forward. Thank you.
John, it's not easy reading all of these whereas clauses, and so I need to wet my whistle. Well, this is tough for me to say goodbye to John Scaletta after 16 years, sitting next to me or near me on the village board as not only a colleague, fellow village board member, but as a dear friend. And I'm going to miss John dearly for many, many different reasons. John has really been an exemplary trustee, a role model for not just other village board members, but all elected representatives in Arlington Heights and in other municipalities. John has done it the right way. He has been the example, the model of a dedicated public servant. He's probably the hardest working village board member that I've known on my 32 years on the village board. Always comes prepared, always has a lot of questions, a lot of tough questions, and they're great. We need that. We need to, because it shows that we're dedicated to analyzing the issue thoroughly and carefully and making sure that we take serious our obligations in providing for the health, safety, and welfare of this community. And nobody has done it better and with more seriousness than John Scaletta over the past 16 years. And so, again, John, I'm going to miss you dearly. But as I said in the other room, I'm not going to miss the fact that our meetings will be a few minutes shorter as a result of John not being on the board anymore. But we will miss his tough questions. There's no doubt about that. So, John, I am going to read this proclamation in honor of your 22 years of service to the village of Arlington Heights. Whereas John Scaletta began his service to the village in 2001 when he was appointed by Mayor Arlene Mulder to the Arts Commission, on which he subsequently served as chair. In 2003, he was appointed to the Economic Alliance and served until 2007. From 2004 to 2006, he served as an appointed member of the Downtown Master Plan Update Task Force. In 2007, John was elected to the Village Board of Trustees and would go on to serve with distinction for 4 consecutive terms. Whereas John Scaletta represented the Village Board in many leadership roles during his 16 years of elected public service, having been appointed in 2009 by Mayor Mulder as the village's representative on the Building Code Review Board, by Mayor Hayes in 2014 to the Metropolis Oversight Committee, and once again in 2019 to the Board of Directors of Meet Chicago Northwest. Whereas, in addition to his service to the village, Trustee Scaletta has served the broader community of Arlington Heights in many ways over the years, including on the Arlington Heights Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors and Executive Board, and the Arlington Heights Downtown Business Association Board of Directors. For his many contributions, John was recognized as the Chamber of Commerce Business Leader of the Year in 2004 and the Hearts of Gold Business Leader of the Year in 2006. Whereas, through his public service, Trustee Scaletta used his experience and business acumen to ensure that village government operated in a cost-effective and fiscally responsible manner, and that village rules and standards were applied fairly and equitably to all businesses and residents. Trustee Scaletta always worked to make certain that issues before the village board were examined carefully and thoughtfully before any final decisions were made, thereby elevating the analysis of village staff and the level of discourse of his fellow trustees. And whereas, as a result of Trustee Scaletta's distinguished service, the village of Arlington Heights is a better place to live, visit, and do business. And village government is more professional, cost-effective, and transparent. Now, therefore, I, Thomas W. Hayes, Mayor, along with the Village Board of Trustees, do hereby recognize and congratulate Trustee John Scaletta for his many contributions to the village of Arlington Heights as both village trustee and dedicated community volunteer and leader. Although we know his efforts on behalf of others will continue on his time on the village board, will be remembered and dearly missed. John, thanks and congratulations. Put that down for a minute. And then John, also to proudly display on your mantle or bookshelf this very fine piece of art. It says, John Scaletta, 2007 to 2023, in appreciation of your dedicated service to the citizens of Arlington Heights as village trustee. Congratulations. And then to take your lovely wife and family out to dinner, please accept that on behalf of the village board.
So as you know, I'm a man of few words, so I am going to take my seat at the dais and read some prepared remarks. Thank you, Mayor, for the kind words. Bit overwhelmed with the entire recognition that you just read out, but it is truly appreciated, and I thank you for your leadership and your dedication to our community. And thank you to Trustee Canty for your service. I wish you the best in your service down in the state. Thank you. I look out and I see my 13-year-old son, Gianni, and I think to myself, he wasn't even born when I was first sworn in. I am so humbled by the turnout of the many residents, commissioners, supporters, friends, village staff, and members of other taxing bodies of Arlington Heights. I had similar feelings when I was elected in 2007, 11, 15, and 19. My campaign platforms always included thinking positively and acting responsibly. Many residents have reached out since I announced I would not seek re-election with heartwarming comments, and I truly appreciate that. I'm honored to have served the citizens and businesses of Arlington Heights. I am grateful for the trust afforded to me to make decisions on their behalf. In 16 years, I've had the honor of serving with 17 different trustees and 2 mayors. While we don't always agree, I have respect for each one of them. I am proud of my service and the accomplishments we have achieved together as a board, a village, and a community. I am most proud of the change in our fiscal year, which I refer to as truth in taxation. Since 2014, we have established an operating budget prior to levying taxes on the taxpayers. I'm also very proud of hiring of our new village manager, Randy Recklouse, the phased approach to the emerald ash borer disease, the neighborhood flooding mitigation efforts, improving our aging infrastructure, and paying down our pension obligations. Our mission as elected officials is to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. This could not be accomplished without the men and women in the Arlington Heights Police Department, Fire Department, Public Works, and every other department within the village. Many residents reach out to me looking for assistance with a problem or concern. This gave me great opportunity to work with every department director and many, many staff members. We are fortunate to have such a professional and dedicated staff, and I am forever grateful for their tireless efforts to serve our residents. It is the transparency of the village board and staff which is often praised by taxpayers. Everyone may not agree with any one decision made by this village board, but they do respect our efforts to be thoughtful and transparent. Upon his hiring, Village Manager Recklaus was tasked with instituting a plan to increase customer service level to our residents. Every resident and business owner should be treated with respect and a high level of customer service because every taxpayer is a customer of the village. I am grateful to my friends, supporters, the voters, those who endorse me, my sons Tripp and Gianni, and most of all, my wife Tony. It takes many hours to prepare for each board meeting. Oftentimes, I have missed out on a family gathering or obligation due to my responsibility to be prepared for an upcoming meeting or other issue affecting the village. Their patience and support of me is invaluable, and I am truly blessed to have them in my life. I urge this board and all future boards to be fiscally responsible, eliminate the vehicle sticker, and always, always make decisions in the best interest of all of our residents. While I do appreciate this recognition, it really comes down to the people of Arlington Heights. I started operating the Arlington Theater in '99, and the people of Arlington Heights embraced me. In 2000, I bought my first home in Hasbrook, and I ran for village trustee to give back to the community which had given me so much. This community is made up of thousands of volunteers who should be celebrated. Whether it is on a board or commission or volunteering at the Northwest Community Hospital, the library, the chamber, Rotary, Meet Chicago Northwest, Jerry's Cafe, Metropolis Performing Arts Center, a local church, school, or pad site, there is no doubt we are a village of good neighbors. And it is the people of Arlington Heights that really make the difference, and I am blessed to live among the people of this great village. I pledge to you that I will stay involved because I genuinely love this community. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I don't want to turn this into a roast, but I do want to give our fellow board members an opportunity to say a few words about Mary Beth or John. And so, Trustee Tinaglia.
Well, thanks. I get to go first. John, Mary Beth, two completely different individuals, two completely different independent thinkers, and I mean that when I say thinkers. These two trustees are role models for all of us and how they perform their work. I'm so excited that Mary Beth is going to carry on for us in Springfield. John, I have a feeling we have not seen the last of him. And I think that it would be wonderful if he carries on with family business and does what he needs to do and wants to do. But I don't think the word retirement really fits John. I think John is a busy guy, an active guy, a sincere guy. I have had the pleasure to sit next to him through all these years, and I've learned a lot from John. I've learned so much about how to behave, how to treat petitioners, how to handle all the issues that come before this village board in a wise and thoughtful way. He does his homework. Mayor Hayes is not exaggerating one bit. John comes prepared to every meeting, ready to ask the hard questions. And so all of us in town here, just speaking as a resident, forget about being a trustee here, we've been blessed to have John and Mary Beth as part of our leadership here. Prior to all of us on this board, there have been some wonderful leaders, wonderful mayors and village managers and so on. And we're just lucky to follow in their footsteps, and I think we all feel that way. So to both of you, God bless you both. I hope you have wonderful, wonderful carrying on of your next chapters in your lives, and I know you will. So good luck to both of you. Thank you for being here all this time.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. And Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I, too, want to thank John and Mary Beth for their service here, their many years. John, sitting next to you, I've learned so much, and the questions that you ask help me be a better trustee, and I really appreciate that. You think of things that I don't necessarily think of, and then I go, why didn't I think of that? So I appreciate that, and all the years of service that you have had here. So these 10 years sitting next to you have been have really been a joy and a wonderful experience. And I wish you all the best. And I know that with your family, you'll have a wonderful time. And like Trustee Tinaglia said, I'm sure you'll be serving the community in other ways. And Mary Beth, for you, the 4 years working with you have been also tremendous. I've also learned from you, as you've said, as Mayor Hayes said, you all have different perspectives, and that helps make all of us so much better. And you also ask questions I don't even think of, and I go, why didn't I think of that? And so I appreciate that. It helps me learn. You also have helped me be a better trustee. And I am thankful that you are in Springfield now, and we'll be working together in that way. And I know that you won't forget us, and and I know that your family will also be glad to have you just doing one additional role instead of two. So, and it's been a tremendous pleasure, and so thank you and best wishes.
Anybody else? Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I too am going to miss both of you. Mary Beth, you and I ran back in 2019 together, and the thing that I admire most about you is you're extremely intelligent, very, very compassionate. You love representing the citizens of Arlington Heights, and as you've said a couple of times, even tonight, we do differ a lot on our opinions, but the thing I've always admired about you is you've been able to talk through things with me in particular. You've always been extremely respectful, and I've not only learned a lot, but it's been a pleasure talking through things with you. So I'm going to really miss you on that. With John, I actually met John many, many years ago when he wasn't married yet to Tony. Tony and I were both Cub Scout leaders in PAC 129, and when you first ran that very first year, I kind of got my taste of, after scouting, giving back to the community by helping you with your door hangers, going around the neighborhood and passing those out. And I've always admired the way you approach things on the board. You've been an excellent person to talk through things. As Trustee Tinaglia said, you come prepared. You ask a lot of good questions, and I'm truly going to miss you on this board. You've been a great source of information and help for me, so I appreciate that.
Trustee Grasse.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to thank both of you for how much I've learned from both of you during my 2 years here. And I just wanted to share one of my favorite quotes. It was by a rabbi on the March of Washington in 1963, where he said, neighbor is not a geographic term, it's a moral concept. And it's about our collective responsibility to each other. And I just wanted to thank both of you for the ways you have really taken that to heart and everything you've done for our village. And I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. I will try to be brief because I know everybody complains about how much I talk as well. Let me just say thank you both to start out with for your service to the village. And a lot of trustees, a lot of people have talked about the things they've learned from Trustee Scaletta. And I remember very vividly, I think it was my second meeting, and let me tell you, I didn't know a thing. But I sat here listening to Trustee Scaletta speaking, and I don't remember where it was, but there was some variance going on at some site, and John talked about how he drove out to the site and was driving around looking at the place. And I thought, wow, what a great thing to do. There have been a number of occasions where you've said something or done something that I said, wow, I should be doing that too. And so thank you for your example to me as a trustee, helping me to learn how to be a better trustee and a better servant to this village. And thank you for your many years of service. Trustee Canty, how can I put this? We are opposites in many ways. if you find that hard to imagine, one of the things that I admire most about you is your energy. I don't know where you get it. I wish I had some of it. But your energy and your drive and your compassion just inspire me. Thank you for your service. I know you will go on to do great things in Springfield. And thank you, Mayor, for letting me speak.
Trustee Bertucci.
Yes. I also want to thank both John and Mary Beth for their service. I remember back in 1999 when this young guy came around town and started getting involved in the chamber and some of the other places, and he was off and running very quickly. So there was no doubt in our mind that John was going to be a force in Arlington Heights early on, and very proud of him. I won't talk about the days at that Hasbrook house. And all the secrets are good with me, and evenings together and that type of thing. But
Now you're getting a little weird.
well, not those. I'm talking about. No. Sorry about that. So hanging out.
We're right in the gutter there. Yeah,
There you go. But the reality is coming forward, and with me getting on the board, I also had learned a lot from you, John, and how you handle yourself on the board, and how you dig down and drill down into subject matter. It is very much a way that I look to aspire to be a trustee also. So thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for your helping with me and mentoring me to a certain respect. So, Mary Beth, thank you. Thank you for your service. I think in the 2 years that I've been here, you've also have opened my eyes to a lot of things that I was not necessarily a champion for, but that I've become a champion for. And it's not all just numbers and budgets and that type of thing. And there's something to be said about all the things you've championed. So good luck in Springfield, and we hope for the best for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Trustee Tinaglia, you have to leave.
Yes, I apologize to everyone, but I have to exit this wonderful ceremony and meeting tonight because I have another obligation in another community. But I wanted to be here to personally thank Mary Beth and John. There are 4 Italians on this board, lots of vowels. We're going to be missing one of us, one of my compadres, and you got to go get them out there in the public somehow, okay? But thank you all for being here to help us celebrate for these two, and thank you, Mayor. I have to excuse myself. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to call on our village manager, Randy Recklouse.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, it's rare that you get to talk about your bosses in public, so I do have some things I wanted to say. Trustee Canty, both Trustee Canty and Trustee Scaletta both made staff better. Trustee Canty, one of the things that you did is it's very common when you have a newly elected trustee to have a lot of passion and a lot of energy, but a lot of times then there's not the experience and some of the knowledge. And one of the things that people need to know about Trustee Canty, she's a relentless learner. She always would call, say, tell me how this works, would go out of her way to meet with departments and understand how things work. And she was a constant force, as Trustee Baldino said, just tell me more. But in that balance of that passion and that knowledge was really powerful, and I think it's going to serve her really well in Springfield. I'm going to miss the Tuesday morning conversations where we'd have about what just happened, Randy. And she was always wanted to understand everyone's perspective, and as has been said, she really opened, I think, this whole organization's eyes about not just how we interact with and treat the people in our community, but also how the village fits into the broader world. And I'm very grateful to her for that, and we're very much going to miss her leadership. Trustee Scaletta, to start with a funny story, true story, when I was first just applying for this job about 9 years ago, I started watching the board meetings, and my wife Tracy was watching me. She's like, well, how does this board look? And I said, well, they all look pretty good, but that John Scaletta guy scares the heck out of me. And he really does ask a lot of questions. But as I got to know John, I realized that he never, ever, ever was coming from a place of trying to trip people up or play gotcha. If John had something on his mind, because he read his stuff far in advance, he would always call me on a Friday or, early before the meeting and say, Randy, I've got a lot of questions about X, Y, or Z, so you need to be ready to answer those questions. And he elevated staff, so he wasn't trying to embarrass us. He was trying to showcase what we knew and how much thought we had put into these things. And we talk about it that this, when we're working on presentations, it has to pass the Scaletta test. We're still going to make sure everything passes the Scaletta test, because not because he's here, but because it's the right thing to do. But I want to thank Trustee Scaletta for that and for all of his support over the years. And on behalf of the whole team, we're going to very much miss you and everything you've contributed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Well, there are no rebuttals allowed, and so we're not going to give you another opportunity to speak. But again, thank you both. We've got some additional business to do tonight before your terms are completed, and so we'll go ahead and move on with that if we could. We do have one other proclamation to read tonight. And is a representative here? Sue Walton, is she here? Sue, come on forward. Sue, why don't you come up here? Well, April 2023 is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so we want to officially recognize that and all that it means to those in need. And so we do want to read this proclamation and present it to Sue as an Arlington Heights resident. And she's very passionate about this issue. And so thank you for being here tonight to accept this on behalf of those in need. And so let me read this proclamation. This is the Village of Arlington Heights proclamation representing Child Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas every child deserves to grow up in a nurturing environment, free from abuse, neglect, violence, or endangerment of any kind. And whereas statistics of children who are abused and neglected escalate each year. Last year, Illinois had 36,146 indicated cases. Whereas the effects of child abuse are felt by whole communities and must be addressed by the entire community. Whereas effective child abuse prevention programs succeed because of partnerships created among the courts, social service agencies, schools, religious organizations, law enforcement, and the business community. Whereas Parents Care and Share, a parent support group program of Children's Home and Aid, offering positive parenting resources and alternatives to help break the cycle of abuse, is sponsoring a Blue Bow campaign to heighten awareness of the need to support families. Whereas all citizens should become more aware of child abuse within the community and to become involved in its prevention and supporting parents to raise their children in a safe and nurturing environment. Therefore, I, Thomas W. Hayes, Mayor, along with the Village Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as Child Abuse Prevention Month and call upon all citizens to increase their participation in efforts to prevent child abuse, thereby strengthening the communities in which we live. So, Sue, let me present this to you. Do you want to take a picture of this? Sue, would you like to say a few words?
I would.
Yeah, let me give you this.
This will, is it on?
Yes.
This will be my 30th year volunteering with the Blue Bow campaign. I could spend a lot of time telling you about the growth of this community, and it is Children's Home and Aid, a program known as Parents Care and Share. And we provide support, free to families, and child care around the state. This became a national, it's certainly the National Child Abuse Prevention Month, but in Illinois, 30 years ago, we read about a mother in Virginia, a grandmother, who had a child killed by her daughter's paramour about not eating his Thanksgiving dinner. She that day started putting blue bows on antennas. Remember antennas on cars? And we adopted that 30 years ago in Illinois. And so we have formed a lot of coalitions around the state and with National Child Abuse, Illinois Child Abuse, the courts, and churches around the state. The northern region has about a little over 10,000 reported and substantiated abuse. The awareness program allows us an opportunity to think about it and allows us an opportunity to reach out to parents and help them find answers, not discipline and punishment that hurts their children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
This
here
is very
tonight, and
nice.
again, thank you for all the great work that
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
Very nice.
Okay, we will move on then in the agenda to citizens to be heard. And we do have no blue cards from individuals to speak on items not on the agenda. So just to make sure, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board on items not on the agenda? All right, I'm going to give this opportunity for any of the individuals who are here for the recognitions and presentations to leave the room at this time. You're welcome to leave. You're also welcome to stay if you want to see the village board in action. Thank you for joining us tonight. All right.
Now that's a little weird.
Yeah. There being no citizens to be heard, we will then move on to old business, and there is none. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I'd like to remove consent legal C, the ordinance concerning the street performers.
Okay, that shall be removed, and we'll take that up under legal. Any other board members wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Anybody in the audience wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any remaining item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the remaining items.
I move to approve the remaining items.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Grasse, seconded by Trustee Canty. All those in favor? No. Roll call.
Trustee Grasse,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes?
Trustee Bertucci,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. We will then move on to new business, and there is one item to consider tonight. That is the Block Arlington 425 PUD extension request. Petitioner present. Why don't you come forward, Bruce? All right, Mr. Adriani, why don't you tell us what you're looking to do here?
Thank you, Mayor Hayes, Board of Trustees, staff.
Just get into the microphone just a little bit.
My name is Bruce Adriani, and our company is developing Arlington 425, and we were before you 2 years ago for your passage of this ordinance that we are looking to extend at this particular time. And the reason why we're extending it is severalfold. Number one, it's been a tough market throughout the pandemic. There have been supply chain issues. We have mortgage rate issues coming up. We have fears of recession coming up. We have an uncertainty of the bears moving into town and how it will affect the downtown. And so for some of those reasons are the reason why we're requesting an extension of this ordinance at this
Thanks.
time.
Staff presentation, Mr. Reckless.
If we have anything to say, our Deputy Director of Planning and Community Development, Michael Lissakatos, is going to have some remarks. Michael?
Okay, Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much. Hope everyone's having a good evening, and congratulations to the trustees, and good luck in the future. As you know, as you may recall, the ordinance to amend the Arlington 425 PUD was adopted on May 3rd, 2021, and it has a 24 months expiration. So the petitioner has approached the board to extend that for an additional 12 months, along with the preliminary plat of re-subdivision approval, which also expires after 24 months. In addition to this, the same ordinance approved a deadline for submission of building permits for the Chestnut Building, which was expected as the second phase of the development. The zoning entitlements required that the submission of the building permits for the construction be submitted by April 30th, 2028. So the petitioner is also applying for that same 12-month extension to that as well. If there are any future extensions, they would go to the Plan Commission first for review and recommendation, then come back to the board. At this time, the staff would recommend approval of both of those extensions, and if there's any questions, I'd entertain them at this time.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Trustee Canty.
So, as I did 4 years ago when I was sworn in to this board, I'll be first to talk about this project. I am a little bit confused. So, you've laid out why there are no efforts underway, right? There's no shovels in the ground. We're not really moving forward on this project. And you've laid out supply chain and COVID and uncertainty in the market and a potential recession. And I understand all of those things, and I appreciate all of those things. And I might be more sympathetic to those things if I wasn't seeing construction happening in this community in that same 4-year period, facing these same setbacks and hurdles that you're addressing. And I think my concern, and again, I'm serving my last meeting on this board, and there will be new trustees who sit before you, and they might take a different approach. But my concern is I'm not seeing a clear path forward on this one. What I'm not seeing is here's what we're doing to overcome these hurdles, and here's how this next 12-month period is going to be different from the last period. And so to me, I think it's an opportunity to sit back and think, am I the right one for this project? If I was the developer, right? Am I the right one? Because what is it that is making it that you can't get shovels in the ground in 4 years? And so I guess I would ask to you, do you have a clear path forward? And what is it?
Thank you. The path forward on this particular development differs in a little bit from other developments you might see around town. Basically, going above the 8 stories, we have what we call high-rise construction, which adds a considerable amount of money to the development, more so than a development that might be built on a pod-type construction where it's concrete down below, and then you might have stick-built for 3-4 stories above that. So there's a big difference there. We've had our company that we engage Power Construction to do pricing structures, and actually they've come back and increased prices this past year. There's been, between now and a year ago, there's been 2 big increases regarding structure, regarding price increases. Steel and concrete have been 2 of those big issues, and that's what goes into a lot of this building.
I hear you, but it's not just Arlington Heights that's seen construction, right? Surrounding communities have seen substantial commercial construction, dense construction, and I hear you when you talk about price increases, but that is also the nature of the construction business. And I don't know if you recall, but I mentioned this when we first talked about this project. I started my career as a lawyer as a construction defect attorney. I am very familiar with developers and general contractors because they were my original clients 4 years. So I understand what you're talking about, but those are things that are inherent in the construction business and in the commercial construction business. So I guess what I'm asking you is, what is the path forward?
Well, during this particular time request that we're going forward, we will explore other avenues of development, whether it be a change in the construction type, maybe reduction. We have a parking lot structure that's right next to the village's garage. So there has been talk about possibly extending that, opening that up to the village, where we can secure more spaces for the village parking garage, which does get crowded. We have the uncertainty of the bears and how it will affect downtown. There's articles in the paper just most recently within the past week of how the bears will affect downtown, whether or not we will become the red-haired stepchild to the bears site and what's going to happen there. Nobody knows what's going to happen there. So I don't know if I'm answering your questions or not.
To be clear, you're not. And I mean that with no disrespect, but what I'm hearing consistently are the challenges that you have in getting shovels into the ground and getting this project underway. What I'm not hearing is how you plan to get over those hurdles. What I just heard in your last answer to this question is that you potentially will rethink the project. Am I hearing you correctly?
As you go along in development, there's always rethoughts of what you're going to be doing on your project, whether it be car design, construction designs, house designs. It happens all the time. And one tries to find a better way to the end. And are we doing this? Are we thinking this? Yes. As we go forward, we are. Have we done this in the past months? Yes, we have.
I hear you. And I guess what I'm saying is perhaps when this project came forward in 2019, it was not yet ready. And perhaps when the extension was requested in 2021, it was not yet ready. And so in 2023, to my mind, based on this exchange, it feels like maybe this is where we say officially, if you need to start over, go do that. But you're going to need to go back through the process again. Because what I'm hearing is 12 months from now, you're going to come back and you're going to need more time because you will have spent a lot of time rethinking this project in the same amount of time. Do you see what I'm saying? Like I'm not hearing what you're going to do with that time to make it different so that at the end of that 12 months, you're going to come back before us and you will have something ready to go. So for now, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Trustee Canty. Mr. Adriani, I guess my thought is, up until recently when the Arlington property sold, this was probably one of the larger, if not the largest piece of property in our town that hadn't been developed. And 4 years ago, we were so excited that you were going to be developing this, and it's a constant question that our residents at least ask me is, what's going on with that empty piece of property? Why have they developed the south end and not the north end? And I explained to them that it was two completely different ownership groups. But I look at this piece of property and I agree. We're going to keep talking about it. I'm not convinced that you're going to do anything there. And I know I've talked, Randy, you and I have talked about this many times. The resources that you've used from our staff, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, we haven't gotten any revenue from that at all. I mean,
just the application fees, but not something to offset.
Yeah, not all the work.
Time. Right.
I mean, I remember when I first came on the board, staff was so excited about this project, they actually laid it all out to us ahead of time before we were even elected because we knew this was coming up and potentially some of us were going to be on this board and we needed to hit the ground running and be able to discuss this project. And it's just been very disappointing to me that we continue to talk about this for the last 4 years, and yet we see other projects in town getting developed. We see other projects in other communities getting developed. It's not like development has completely stopped over the last 4 years, but I'm just not convinced that giving you this extension that we're not going to be here 4 years from now still talking about an empty piece of property in downtown, and that concerns me. the effort that our staff puts in, because I know you've been having dialogues with staff over the last 4 years, correct?
Correct.
And that's a lot of time, energy, and money from the village standpoint, and we're just not seeing anything happen. It's still just a big grassy field. So I'm concerned that it'll be sitting for another 4 years, and we'll be talking about this every time this comes up. But I'd like to hear what some other thoughts are.
Yeah,
Thank
Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. And I must confess that I share the concerns that have been expressed. The last time you came before the board, I asked one question, and I had a feeling that you weren't going to be able to answer it, and the answer that I got wasn't what I was looking for. But I asked you what were the chances that this was going to move forward if we gave you this extension. That question wasn't answered. And so I think what we're asking is, what are the chances that this is going to move forward in the next 12 months?
Well, I wish I could say that the market is good right now. I wish I could say that the economy is good right now. It's not. I just got through mentioning before the meeting tonight to Mr. Reckloss about sitting down, having a meeting, and seeing how we go forward to get this going now. And that's what I mentioned tonight. I wish I could, in honesty and sincerity, say I could start this project tomorrow. I really wish I could. That's been my business all my life. And to, go forward and risk some things, just like the Bears development. Nobody knows what's going to be going on there. And it's not going to become overnight. And you've got a big project on your hands out there, too. I've got a big project here in town. And I've done a lot of developments here in town. And, just because one particular project is sitting there, and it's not languishing, okay? Because we talk about this in our office and our staff all the time as to what to go forward. And being faced with some economic concerns, whereas, you don't want me to put up anything that's going to be a loser either. And I definitely do not want to do that also. I've got my money at stake. I got my reputation at stake. I've got a partnership with the village here that's been my partnership for a long time. I've worked in town here over 30 years, and it's been something that I hold in very high regard. And to ask for the extension tonight, I think is something that I think I should get done and go forward with. If I can tell you honestly that I will start and work on plans once we have everything done, I will have a next meeting with all my staff and my outside consultants also. And these are people that have done a lot of work in town too. Power Construction has done a lot of work at the hospital, and to come and give us numbers to do things, I don't want to be off on our numbers. We have projections regarding what we have for rent. I was just talking to one of the other builders that's here tonight regarding rental structures of what they're going to be getting over there by Northwest Highway and Dryden and whatnot. And it's far below what we have estimated to get down here. It's a little bit different of a marketplace right outside the downtown area. We feel we have a strong area of what we are. We feel we will probably have one of the best products, the way it's laid out now, with the amenities and everything else that goes along with it. I'm up here tonight just to ask you for your faith in me to get something going, to extend this so I can get something going, and face the marketplace that's out there we have already with the economy. Interest rates right now are high. The amount of money from loan to equity has been raised quite a bit. It used to be maybe 75, 80%. Now it's maybe 50%, 55% loan to equity. So there's those financing hurdles. There's the interest rate that's up a lot. And these mean a big difference at the bottom line. I've just sent something today to a large apartment person downtown talking about this particular project and their particular project. So it's not as though I'm sitting back not doing anything. It's hard to move certain forces out there beyond your control. Is the marketplace, are the interest rates, the uncertainty within the market, are they beyond our control? They certainly are. Not knowing if a war goes on that can catapult everything into being, downturn, it's right before our eyes. And we all see that. We all see that. We're all business people. We're all here representing business people within town, and it's a tough place out there. I've got my involvement here. I'd love to make this go forward as soon as possible. Yesterday. I wish I could, because that means that it will be up and running now and hopefully be successful. I don't have many unsuccessful projects. I've had a couple during the downturn in 2008, and I've been faced with that before. Fortunately, I was strong enough to come through that, but I don't forget that. And I'm sure that in your businesses, even the construction business, you've probably seen buildings, because I've worked with some construction attorneys also. And you see buildings that were built, you think they're perfect, and they still have some issues. So it's not easy, and I would just love to invite someone else into my world over here to see what it's like. And if you'd like to do that, I'd be happy to spend time with each one of you individually. I'm up here tonight just to request your approval for this extension so that I can go forward. Okay?
Mr. Adrian, as Trustee Canty was trying to say, I think what she was trying to say, nobody's questioning your integrity. Nobody's questioning your commitment to this project. We're just trying to get some kind of comfort level that there's going to be movement. That's it. Okay? We all understand the challenges. We all understand what you've told us about the specific challenges you've faced on this project. We get that, and we're sympathetic to it. But we're being asked to extend this PUD and the re-subdivision without having really heard that there's been much progress. You see from our perspective, okay, I don't mean to put you on the defensive. I'm just trying to get some comfort level that there's going to be movement.
No, I understand that.
Okay? That's all I'm trying to ask. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Trustee Bertucci.
Thank you, Mayor. With your permission, I'd like to just ask staff what the timeline that they would like to see happen during these 12 months. In other words, Randy, is there some checkpoints that you would like to see take place, each quarter or at some point in time, so that we make some progress in the next 12 months?
Oh, I mean, I think that's difficult to do, but I think, I think it's fair to kind of try to figure out how realistic is it to get this plan done over the next 12 months, and what would need to happen to get that done. And, Mr. Adriani did approach me, and we are talking about getting together to kind of talk about next steps, and that'll be some of the questions that we'll ask is, what would need to happen for this particular plan to get done, or what types of alternative plan do we think could be successful, in the current environment? Because the market does evolve and things are changing. But I think that's the big thing is, before, as it was noted by Trustee Schwingbeck and by Trustee Baldino, we've spent a lot of time on this project. There are a number of other efforts that are on our plate, and we want to make sure that, the time that staff spends is well spent, in that we know that if a new plan is presented to us, that it's presented with the intent to move forward. And again, it's not a question as a set of integrity, but is this are we working on something that's merely a concept? We would like to spend time on something that's going to result in actual construction, based on all the factors in the economy, based on the financing capabilities of players involved. We want to make sure whatever we're talking about is realistic based on all those factors. So I think it would be hard to put it down in terms of a time frame, but I do think we want to begin those conversations quickly so that we're not wasting time of our time or the property owner's time. We want to make sure that we're all working productively.
Okay, so the expectation where the next step would be to have some dialogue, and I would think you would want that within the next 30 to 60 days.
For sure.
Okay. Are you in agreement with that, Mr.
Very
AJ?
much so, even less than that.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I have to say that I, too, had shared the same concerns that my fellow trustees when I saw this was coming to us tonight. I was thinking, is it really going to happen? Are you going to be able to produce the project that you hope to have? And it's a great project, but like the others have said, I too see projects that are moving forward in this community and in other communities. I ride the train downtown, and I see the developments that are happening along the tracks in Mount Prospect and down Des and further down, even things that are going up in the city. And yeah, that's a whole different situation, but they all face the same sorts of problems with the pandemic having in the supply chain and the economy. And so I too wondered how you were going to move forward. I am willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and, approve this recommendation. But I will say I also have concerns that in 12 months, we're going to be sitting here and talking some more. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. Trustee Grasse.
Thank you. I just wanted to concur with my fellow colleagues on the board. I too have some concerns just with the length of time this is taking. And I did have a quick question to see if we could do something. I would be willing to give another 12 months and see what happens from there. But I was wondering with the second recommendation, extending that, I know it has to be confirmed by April 30th, 2028, but is there a way we could do May 1st, 2028 and not give another whole year for the number 2 recommendation? It just seems like that's pushing things out, or I was just curious if something like that could be worked just to allow this to go forward and see what happens in the next 12 months and then go from there, rather than giving another full year many years down the road.
Are you asking staff?
Staff, yes, please. I'm sorry.
I mean, they can be approved, that one can be approved without the other.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. I don't know
One
if
could be
you
approved
heard
without the
Michael. Yeah,
other.
number 1 could be approved without the other, but we can do whatever the board wishes in that regard.
Okay. So number 2 doesn't have to be approved tonight. We still have time to.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
My recommendation would be I do not support number 2 at this time, but I'm willing to support number 1 based on the talk we've had so far on the board.
Number 2 is a 12-month extension to the deadline for submission of a building permit for the Chestnut Building from April 30th, 2028 to April 30th, 2029.
Okay. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Randy, can you explain the process that after this 12-month extension, it would need to go back to the Plan Commission? Can you what's that process?
I would defer to Michael or Hart because I don't want to get that wrong.
Right, so essentially, if the petitioner wanted 12 more months, they would have to go back to the Plan Commission. If the Plan Commission has some of the same reservations, there would be, I think, more dialogue, more debate, especially with staff. And I think a lot of the conversations you're talking about would play themselves out with the commission, and then there would be a recommendation that comes to you that would, I think, give a full throat to what you're talking about if it did get to that point. I think it would have more insights into the actual possibility of what the project would be in the future, and if it had to come back to some sort of reimagining of the site. And that would be obviously not be an extension. That would be something that would be a modification to the PUD. So I think those are the types of conversations that would happen at the Plan Commission, where I think it would get a little bit more in-depth and detailed with the staff as far as what the viability of it is at that point.
Okay. It appears that you want to say something before I say something else, so go ahead.
It just got me thinking with one of your questions regarding the extension for the Chestnut property. Chestnut property is a smaller building. The one on Campbell is a 234-unit building. We've got the retail down below. We've got a big basement in there. And it's possible, and I'm just thinking about this now, that what if we did the Chestnut building first? It's a smaller building. It's 85 units there. And would that help satisfy some of the concerns that you have regarding this parcel? You have less risk in there, and the great visibility from the Campbell piece might do something to energize even the Campbell building. So maybe if those could be reversed, those particular items in there. I'm just thinking out loud. So your questions got me thinking, and sorry to interrupt you, John.
My response would be no. I look at this a little bit differently in that, yes, I'm a little frustrated that it's not moving. I'm a little frustrated that we've spent a lot of time from staff and we're not seeing that come to fruition yet. I also look at it from the standpoint that it's not as if you just have come up with ideas. I mean, you've spent money on engineering, architecture, traffic studies. I'm tired of talking about Block 425, but I'm sure you're tired of trying to figure out how to make it work as well. I'm concerned that if you build Chestnut before you build Highland, I'm sorry, if you build one before the other, I think that if you can't do this, that it's best that you find someone that can. And it's not that I don't believe that you physically can't do it or that you can't find the financing to make it happen. I mean, I think that was part of a concern way back when. And now things have only become more challenging. I think that, you know, all of the concern of like the downtown just going away because the Bears come to town, you know, I don't find that to be as valid as many do. I do want to find a way that they complement each other, but at the same time, they build a Bears stadium over there and there's a whole, you know, atmosphere over there. I'm still going downtown. I'm going for the atmosphere of charming and quaint and having, you know, these all these great restaurants. Yeah, they're going to have restaurants out there, but they're going to be Let Us Entertain Yous and a bunch of other big chain restaurants that are going to be upscale. I get that. That's not what I'm looking for. Because there's plenty of places to go for that kind of atmosphere, and I'm not interested in it. I'm grateful that you haven't started building something and stopped. I'm grateful that you're not building something for the sake of building something. I would just urge you that if at some point you lose your passion to get this done, just because it costs a lot of money. I get it. This is not like, you know, I'm going to build a couple of townhouses. I'm building, you know, a small skyscraper. You know, I mean, it's a high rise because you're over 60 feet. And so there's a lot of cost there, and you have to provide the parking and everything. I mean, I think it's great that you're going to talk to Manager Recklaus and to Charles, and you guys are going to have a great conversation. But I don't know that there's much more that the village can do to help you. But I think that you need to kind of reevaluate where you're at with the overall project and figure out whether or not you're the guy that wants to develop this, because you've had it for a long, long time, and I know that deep down you want to build that development. You've had it for a long, long time, and you didn't buy the piece of property just because. You bought it because you believed in Arlington Heights, and you bought it because you wanted to make a difference in our downtown, and I know you do. You just got a lot going against you. And, you know, the concerns of my colleagues are valid. I do look at it a little bit differently in that I understand that there's a tremendous amount of risk, and I understand that you're already upside down. You're already upside down. You've been paying property taxes for over 20 years. You know, you've now put out all this money on engineering, traffic studies, architects, all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I've missed a couple in there.
But I'm not upside down.
You've made money off of this property?
No, but I'm not upside down.
He's got equity.
Well, my point of being upside down is you've put out more money than you're making off of the property at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
It's almost $1 million to get all the entitlements.
Yeah.
Up to now.
Okay. I mean, so when I say upside down, I mean that you've put out more than you've made.
Mm-hmm.
So
far.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's great opportunity there.
There is, and I have not lost the passion.
Okay.
You mentioned the word before, challenging.
Yeah.
This marketplace today is very challenging. You know, as I mentioned before, you all work out there, you see what's going on, and it's not easy for somebody to come out and get financing for this. Even the big boys.
What was the first year that you got approval from us?
Oh, boy.
I don't know. I mean, it's come before us so many times I can't keep track.
I think it was
Not so many, no.
Well, I've read
Yeah.
at least 3 packets this thick.
Yeah.
So there's been changes along the way, so.
There have been changes. We had a taller building before on top of the garage.
Yeah.
And economically, Power Construction came back way high on that, just because it was it was a concrete structure podium that had to have transfer beams all over and everything else too, columns, and it was very expensive. I mean, it was a great project. It would have been.
I agree.
You know, it would have been nice. And this one here is good too. Jim Tinaglia was the architect of record. We got the designs, and maybe it should have been shorter and less expensive rather than a lot of the looks that we have right now, because it's a classic building.
I agree. My point is, okay, we've talked about this, we've reviewed it, and it's taking a tremendous amount of time, and it's your time too.
Mhm.
But we need to get something done, or you probably should just move on with this project. Because
sit down with manager
as you can
Ricklock.
see, there is no appetite up here to keep this going.
can see
And
that.
we want to see you be successful. We want to see that project be successful, whether it's you or somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish you the best, and I will be supportive of it. And I'm going to be supportive of both of them, because I think at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if Chestnut moves out to 2029, because I think at the end of the day, you know, the bigger project needs to be completed first, because otherwise you're going to have these townhomes with this big vacant piece of property in the middle, which isn't going to do anything for it's not going to make this a better project, and is only going to make the lives of those people in those condos miserable when the high-rise has to be built and the parking garage and everything else that goes along with it. I wish you the best. I'm done.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Randy, just one question that I have of you. If we weren't to grant this tonight, what would that, I think I know the answer, but what would it mean to Mr. Adriani? What would he have to do?
All of the approvals that have been granted would expire, and if he wanted to propose, even do the same thing again, he would have to go through the process.
The whole process?
Yes.
Okay. And I, as Trustee Scaletta highlighted again, there's been other folks that have been paid on this project, attorneys, architects, traffic study, engineers.
Civil engineers, traffic study people.
And I mentioned this, Randy, before on large projects like this. If we're going to grant this and there's going to be a lot more discussion, there's more output from our staff. We really don't make any money until permits are applied for and given, and then he'd have to pay for permitting. I mean, is there anything we can do to make some income off of this, because it's going to continue and we're going to?
That the even permit revenue doesn't necessarily offset all of the staff time.
Right.
That it's really more. The hope that if the project is built, there'd be an increase in tax revenues to kind of justify it. So, no, I mean, I don't know of something off the top of my head that could be done in the interim for us. I mean, it's part of, it's part of the challenge, and that's why we want to make sure, we have a good conversation with Mr. Adriani, and I think staff has a good relationship with Mr. Adriani, talking about this, but we want to make sure again that intent is there and that there's a realistic path through, whether it's with this plan or something else. We all understand what that is, and so we can budget our time and energy and so forth appropriately.
Right.
Because there's a number of things kind of on the village's plate right now, and we want to make sure we're spending our time well.
Right, and all the neighborhood meetings that took place and the effort. I mean, I certainly do not want to have to do that all over again from the very beginning. So I'd certainly be supportive of doing this, but I just would really like to see something happen. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
I share the same concerns as all of my colleagues about this, Mr. Adriani. We need to see some progress. We just have to. We just can't have a vacant piece of property, that's so valuable in our downtown area remain vacant for much longer. And so we really need to move forward on this. I'm inclined to grant the request, but this would be the last time that I would grant an extension. We just have to see some progress. And as Trustee Scaletta indicated, I'm not in favor of building the Chestnut building at this time. I want to see the whole thing built And I would be afraid that if you built the Chestnut Building, the rest of it might never get built. And so that would be not a good outcome. And so I'm inclined to grant the extensions for that reason, but only for 12 months.
Is it okay if I come back to you in 6 months and report back to you my progress? Or would you want me to do it with Manager Reckloss?
You can come back next month.
Yeah.
I won't be here.
Or sooner.
Yeah, Mr. Eckloss will keep us informed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So what's the will of the board?
I would move to approve the PUD extension request for Block 425.
Second.
Motion by trustee Scaletta, second by trustee Grasse. Further discussion from the board? Anything from the audience? Go ahead, please, come forward. Yeah, just come to the microphone if you would, and give us your name.
Hi, my name is Lisa Doty. I live at 24 South Mitchell. I've had a front row seat for the development of Block 425 for the past 20 years that we've owned our home. I can tell you at this point that resident support, at least on my block, is still very high for these buildings to be built. We still want this to happen. And really all I could say is that I would, really like to see you guys grant that extension. I have been disappointed. I mean, we all have been disappointed that it remains dog poop park. I'm sorry to use that. But speaking of that, I was walking my dog the other day around that area, and I had a thought. I had just bought a bunch of native plants for a pollinator garden for my own home. And I'm walking past this huge piece of property that's just monoculture grass that has great sun, also has a flooding issue, where I'm wondering if maybe in the interim, the developer would consider devoting some of that land to a native pollinator garden in the interim time, and that those plants then could be incorporated into the landscape of the building. And I would also ask the board to think, when new projects are being talked about being developed, that when they talk about the landscaping, then it's not just, oh yeah, you're gonna put a bush here and a tree over there, maybe I'm gonna put some flowers in a bed over there. I think that the developers should be held to the standard of putting in native Illinois plants that are pollinator friendly and making sure that those work for them, because in the long term, it's gonna benefit all of us. So that's all I had.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. Doty. We got to get a shovel in the ground before we consider pollinator plants, but that's a good point. We have a motion and a second. Anything further from the audience? Mr. Eckloss.
I just wanted to clarify. I don't know if the intent of the motion maker is to make a motion on both points 1 and 2, or
Yes.
okay.
Okay. Anything further from the audience? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Pass.
Passed by trustee Canty. Good luck to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
We have no other new business, and so we'll move on in the agenda to the legal item that was removed. Mr. Eckloss, you want to address that?
Thank you. Back in February, at a committee of the whole meeting, we discussed the topic of buskers or street performers, and there was a desire by the board to introduce some new regulations for folks that are performing on the streets, particularly in our downtown areas. We've seen an increase of that. And so an ordinance was drafted and kind of refined based on the direction of the board at that meeting. And what we're doing is we're saying that, buskers or street performers will not require any type of license or permit. However, they will be limited to working from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. on any day. They may not obstruct any safe, vehicular, bicycle, or pedestrian passage. That they cannot construct any type of structures. They cannot amplify sound at all. And the other aspect of this is that we're making it clear that the regulations are not, we're not talking about people that are performing as part of any type of village event. And so, again, whether it's someone that is hired by the village for Sounds of Summer or for Harmony Fest, or whether it's sanctioned by the village as part of Arlington Al Fresco or part of our sidewalk licensing process, that those individuals that are operating in that manner, that are operating in a manner consistent with their license agreement or consistent with whatever agreement we have with them as performers on a stage, that they're not subject to the regulations that have been written here. And I know that, there have been some questions about the specificity of that by members of the business community, and there was a reason that this was drafted the way that it was by the village attorney and staff, but we're happy to answer any questions, and there's always many ways to do different things, and so we're open to feedback and direction on that.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Ecklouse. Trustee LaBedz had removed this item, so I'll call on her first. Trustee
Thank you,
LaBedz.
Mayor Hayes. Two things. First of all, when we had originally discussed it, I had asked that to see if buskers could delay their start till 10 a.m. from 9 a.m., and I was glad to see that in this ordinance so that at least on a Sunday or Saturday morning, they're not necessarily out there too early when people are trying to enjoy their coffee on their balconies and so forth. So I appreciate that. And then the other thing was to make sure that we are all clear that it doesn't, that those businesses that have the, in al fresco, that have an area where they can have performers that they contract with to provide entertainment music for their patrons, that this does not, those aren't buskers.
Right. Yeah. If someone is performing within a designated, for example, al fresco area that a restaurant's been assigned, they're not subject to these regulations as written. If someone hired a performer and they were roving the streets, they would. And so it's not the fact that they're being hired, who they're being hired by. It's where they're physically located is kind of what's driving this.
Okay. So that was a clarification that I was looking for.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Trustee Bertucci.
Randy, and you and I exchanged some messages about this, but can you point to or read off exactly where in the ordinance that it will set that it prevents the licensed performers, whether it's Big Shots, Hey Nanny, whatever, that where the ordinance specifies that they are not part of this ordinance?
There's a couple of different places.
Okay.
And so looking at Section B, hours of performance, it says, except as part of a special event sponsored or approved by the village, no street performer may perform or provide entertainment within a public right-of-way or public park before 10 a.m. or after 9 p.m. on any day. It says later in the ordinance under subsection E, sound amplification except as part of a special event sponsored or approved by the village. No street performer may amplify sound, blah, blah, blah. And then the last part was, I'm sorry, the nuisance section, yes. It was use of a microphone, speaker, megaphone, or mechanical amplification device within the area bounded by Arlington Heights Road, Sigwald Street, Chestnut Avenue, Wing Street, Highland Avenue, and Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way, except as part of a special event sponsored or approved by the village. And so we are saying, and we've said on the record in the last meeting, we're saying again, that anything that's sanctioned as part of a village agreement, such as a license agreement, al fresco agreement, or a performance agreement, for us makes this a village-sponsored event. And that's how we're interpreting that as written. Because there could be, if we would have written this before al fresco was contemplated, we didn't know al fresco was contemplated, and so we wanted to write it more broadly because there could be a new event or activity that we're not contemplating today. But anything that's village-sponsored or sanctioned, is clearly, because it's on our right-of-way, managed by the rules of that sponsored or sanctioned event.
So I understand it the way you explain it, but when I read this and it just says special event, and we're not special event is not pointing to the specifics of a licensed agreement or anything else. I'm somewhat concerned, and you say it's that we all understand it because Randy is explaining it now, but what about years from now when Randy's gone and and John's gone, and Mary Beth's gone, and maybe a few more of us, and somebody brings this ordinance up, and where is it showing that exception other than to say special event? Where is the definition of special event?
Yeah, I'll attempt to answer that, Trustee Bertucci and members of the board. Trustee Bertucci, you're right. It's not in this ordinance, and I think the village manager has accurately explained the approach that we're taking. Drafting this is a little bit of an art form because we're dealing with First Amendment rights here. And I know we've talked about this. I think we had our committee of the whole. Our streets are traditional public fora, and so we have to be mindful of drawing distinctions as to who can engage in what is broadly called speech on our rights of way. Because of that, our goal was to be a little bit vague here, and some of that is because, as the manager explained, we don't know all the possible uses or possible means of expression that someone may try to bring to our streets. I think, for example, none of us knew what a flash mob was 10 years ago or 15. These are things that count in this arena. With that in mind, it was our goal. We did have al fresco in mind, very much so. We are, of course, aware of the importance of that program to the village, to its downtown area, certainly over the last few years since the pandemic. We can make this ordinance, we can write it a little bit differently if that's the will of the board. I don't mean to be obstructionist in that regard. So we'll take your direction in that regard, of course. But it is, there's a benefit to not calling everything out down to the most minute detail here, and that's both in terms of enforcement and regulation by staff as well as an eye toward our obligations with respect to the Constitution.
Okay. So, and I know you're both aware that there are some of the businesses downtown that are concerned about that, particularly, and I would assume that Chip from Paynani is going to speak, so I'm going to let him speak to his concerns more so than trying to do that for him. But I just want to make sure that we give him the confidence that 6 months from now we're not going to be, for lack of better words, and I don't mean to say hassling, but we're not going to be doing anything to prevent him from doing what he does in his business, in his license, his agreement with the village. So,
if I could, Trustee Bertucci, if the village decided for one reason or another that we wanted to say we don't want to have music within, outdoor music within al fresco, we wouldn't need this ordinance to do it. It's something the board has granted broad authority to staff to say you just can't have music in al fresco, and we have that authority now. So this ordinance does not affect the village's ability to say that, turn that on or turn that off, because the fact is they're working on our public right of way. They don't have any vested right in doing that other than what we grant them through these license agreements every year. And so I just wanted to make that point, that wouldn't impact that. We still have the ability to say yes or no. We always would.
okay, so I guess to Hart's statement, is there any possibility of just saying licensed agreement somewhere to say that not only special event but licensed agreements are not, this does not pertain to them?
I think the answer is if that's the direction of the board, then yes.
Are you I mean, I understand that you have some concerns about jeopardizing the intent or the or somebody challenging the document or the ordinance or whatever is by putting that in there. Do you think that that's going to jeopardize?
No, I
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
If for example, the exceptions were clear that it's part of it, and I'm not gonna wordsmith it yet, Trustee Bertucci. I know I want to hear from the rest of the board as well. I know there's members of the audience as well, but just between as we talk about your question, if the exception was for a part of a special event sponsored, approved by village, or pursuant to a license agreement approved by the village, again, it's just conceptual language. It would put a little more onus on staff to make sure that we didn't start drawing distinctions in terms of ability to perform that might implicate some of these legal concerns, but I think the language itself in the ordinance doesn't concern me in and of itself.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mayor.
Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you. I appreciate the questions. I mean, I was somewhat satisfied with Manager Recklaus's response to Mr. Brooks that was specific. I mean, because if somebody told me that, and I owned Hainani and I couldn't perform, I'd come over here with the email that said, here, it says that I can. And back when Alfresco first started and we had some concerns raised by the residents of downtown, we clarified exactly, who has the autonomy to regulate the level of sound in the downtown, and that all went back to the village manager. And so I'm comfortable with the way it's written. I can appreciate you wanting clarification, but this meeting alone, the email that Mr. Recklaus sent out, and the language contained in the ordinance, I think covers all of it. I understand why you would want it to be more detailed. I'm siding with Hart on this in that I want this ordinance to be written in the best way for enforcement and to avoid litigation. And so that's why I'll be supporting it as is.
Right, other Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I am as well. I mean, it clearly says in there a village-sponsored event or something that's approved by the village, which, Randy, you have approved.
Correct.
Alfresco, and as Trustee Scaletta said, when we were discussing this back when Alfresco there was some noise issues in town, we did give you full autonomy to shut it down if necessary. So I think reading through this, it does give our Alfresco businesses, whoever has that agreement with us, to play music in a respectful way. So I'm fully supportive of the way it's written. I think it protects our businesses as well. And for some reason, as we move forward, if Alfresco stops or we decide not to give a business license out, I think we're covered there too. So,
Anybody else? Mr. Brooks.
Hi there, Chip Brooks from Hainani, and first of all, let me thank you all for allowing this to be discussed and taken off the consent agenda. I know it appears to be the kind of nitpicking that makes trustees want to retire, but we'll get through it. Before I get going on the details, I want to thank you all for adopting the cellar proclamation a couple of weeks ago about the teen club cellar and the honoring the guy that founded it. I'm going to be meeting with him on Wednesday. He doesn't know about it yet, but I'm going to tell him about it then. Okay.
About your meeting? No, go ahead.
I'm going to about the proclamation. So it comes down to this, and I don't think we've been clear about, I think there's a lot of lack of clarity here about what the regulatory structure is, what it should be, and what this ordinance covers. So let's start with this. I think Mr. Recklaus did a nice job of saying what we're trying to regulate here, which is street performers, which are people playing music on the streets for people passing by on the streets. That's a street performer. Otherwise, we talk about them, I think, in the village, in the staff's memo as buskers. Great term. So that's what we're trying to regulate. There are a couple of things that the drafter of this, Mr. Passman, is trying to do that don't have to do with street performers or buskers. There's a couple things that he's trying to make sure we're not covering, one of which is people that play at Hainani for happy hours. In the summer, we're going to have, our plan is to have happy hours on Friday and Saturday nights from 4 to 6 with outdoor performers. That's all our outdoor plans are at the moment. So that's one thing we have to consider. And then the other thing is things like Sounds of Summer, where the village sponsors or approves of events that are going to play loud, amplified music outside. So the idea is we want to regulate street performers, and we want to make sure that we're not putting limitations on people like Hainani or the Village's Sounds of Summer program. The ordinance really doesn't do that very well at all. It's very confusing. So when we talk about the definition of a street performer, somebody who plays music on a public right-of-way, that's what Section A of this ordinance says. Our performers at Hainani, when they're performing outdoors from 4 to 6 p.m. on Fridays and Saturday nights are performing on a public way. That makes them street performers or buskers under this ordinance, covered by the elements of the ordinance. I think we all agree our performers are not street performers or buskers. So I'm really, it's going to lead to, you're going to have members of the public coming up to you and saying, by the way, Hainani's got buskers out there, let's do something about it. We shouldn't be covered by this statute at all, by this ordinance. There should be, the thing that my problem is, there should be an element of Section A of this ordinance that defines what a street performer is. That says what you all were getting to, which is if there is a performer who is employed by somebody licensed under our al fresco license to occupy a public right-of-way, they are not a street performer. If we have that in the ordinance, then the rest of it, from our perspective, you don't have to worry about the whole, is al fresco a public event or not a public event, because you've said what you all, I think, want to say, which is our conduct and the conduct of our performers on the street is governed by our license agreement with the village. We all agree with that. And it contains, as you said, Mr. Recklouse, broad powers on the staff's part to control things. It's got powers on the village's board part, but it's all under our license agreement. That's the regulatory structure that should apply to us. It's the regulatory structure that does apply to us. What you don't need is to have another structure that's kind of overlaid on that in the form of this ordinance. There's a little bit of mischief in the structure, in the sort of structure that the village manager has proposed here, which is to say, okay, Hainani, your performers really are street performers under this ordinance, but some of the regulations won't apply to them because we've used this vague, and what Mr. Passman said, intentionally vague description of village events. Part of the problem with that is there are 5 regulations underneath the definition of street performer, 5 limitations. 2 of those, as Mr. Recklouse said, contain exceptions for this vague term, village events. 3 of them do not. So we've set up something that's not only vague in its definitional structure, but incomplete, and it doesn't excuse us and our street performers from 3 out of the 5 regulations. So you've really created something that is confusing and intentionally vague, and for us that creates a risky business structure. As you all said, in the summer of 2020, we had issues with sound. We were all trying to figure out how to deal with COVID. And it wasn't just that we said that the village staff could manage this process. This board was ready to adopt rules that, while not intended to put Hainani out of business, would have. I got a very courteous phone call from Mr. Recklouse saying, these are the rules we're going to adopt. And I said, hey, wait a second, this is going to kill us. And so we ended up in a discussion that kind of put that to the side, and we ended up with a different structure. But I'm scared to death that if you say, oh, Hainani, your performers are buskers for the purposes of this ordinance, and we're going to regulate you in that way in addition to your license, we can be shut down, you can get complaints at a moment's notice outside of our license process. That's not really the right thing to do.
Mr. Brooks, I'm going to have to limit you to your comments because technically you're supposed to have 3 minutes, so please wrap up.
I will wrap up. Thank you very much. The structure of this also in trying to do accept the Sounds of Summer, for example, under the public event is also kind of misguided, I think. Because what you really want to say is people that are employed by the village or for village-sponsored events are also not street performers. That also belongs in the definitional structure. So I'm going to ask you if you would please send this back to Mr. Passman for some more precise drafting. I don't think it's hard to do in a way that will make it clear that we are governed by our license agreement and that our performers are not covered under any aspect of this busking ordinance. Thank you.
All right, Trustee Canty had a question.
So, yeah,
Mr. Brooks, Mr. Brooks, stay up.
I just want to see if I can try and clarify something. So when al fresco is set up, right, it changes what is a public right-of-way, essentially, right? Because that is why our restaurants are allowed to put tables out into the sidewalk and impede people's progress down that sidewalk and in the streets. And that's why cars are not allowed to drive down those streets, right? We effectively shift for that period of time the public right-of-way.
The way I would characterize it would be that we've granted exclusive rights to certain businesses for, exclusive use of portions of the public right-of-way during that period. I wouldn't say that they cease to be public rights-of-way. I don't know if you would put any different.
And I agree with that. I agree with that, Manager Reckless.
Because I think by this same token, we could also get complaints that Hanani's tables were impeding the public right-of-way if we haven't effectively shifted where the public right-of-way is for that period of time.
We could, I didn't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry.
No, but that's what I'm saying, right? Because you are not, as of right now, like Hanani could not go right now and set up tables on the sidewalk or in the street because it is not the period of Arlington al fresco, right?
So, not to split hairs, but during, warmer weather, they can set up on the sidewalks, but not the entire sidewalk. But I know that's not what you meant.
But it is exactly what I mean. They cannot impede the right of way. People still have to be able to walk on the sidewalk.
100%.
Correct. In Arlington al fresco, they can impede that right of way because we allow a license for that.
Yes, we
because
allow
it is a
them
special event.
to impede in a specified way. And if, just to make it clear for the record, there have been cases where, I won't name names, where restaurants have started to, there's been some creep of, the fence got moved a little bit, and we've had to kind of move it back. And that's how we've kind of said, hey, that's outside of you're coloring outside the lines, and that's not what we agreed to, so we had to move it back.
And I guess I'm trying to get to a place where, because I appreciate what you're saying, right? Like, you are concerned that somebody is going to be able to come back and parse these words and say, well, technically, you are in the public right-of-way, and we don't like the music that's playing, and therefore we can shut it down, right? We can stop you from playing.
I'm just worried, and by the way, I agree with Mr. Reckhaus. We end up with, in al fresco, a license to use that right-of-way. It still belongs to the village, and the village still controls it with that license agreement. I am concerned that that this vague regulatory structure will lead to confusion and complaints to us, but complaints to the village, that the village doesn't really intend to create an opening for, but they're going to come up anyway because of the vagueness.
And I appreciate that, but by the same token, I think that that sort of vagueness would exist for the whole program of al fresco in which these musicians are playing, because that same vagueness would apply.
I'm not sure I understand.
To the tables, to the seating, to the fencing. So during Arlington al fresco, you cannot drive your cars down those streets, and you cannot walk down those sidewalks in a typical fashion, right? So right there, it makes it a special event, and the public is no longer accustomed to using those public right-of-ways in that same way that they do during the rest of the year. So while we may not in the ordinance have said we are shifting the public right-of-way, we have effectively shifted the public right-of-way for a period of time, and that's sort of what your license gets you, in essence. It shifts the public right-of-way. And so what this busking ordinance, to me, says is that so long as they are within the boundaries of your space and they are not in the new and effective public right-of-way, that's fine, as long as you comply with the terms of your license. But the second that they start walking down the middle of the street, the middle of Vale or the middle of Campbell, now they're out of line.
I don't think your staff is going to want to take a position that says that by virtue of the license agreement, for that license period, the public right-of-way becomes not a public right-of-way. I think they'd probably rather say that it is a public right-of-way that they're permitting a use of in a particular way, but I don't know.
No, but I think, to your point, Trustee Canty, I mean, I agree with what you're saying conceptually, that, and I agree with what Mr. Brooks said. The entire thing is always a public right-of-way because we own it. But I think we're struggling for a term, and I don't have it either. Like, during al fresco, what is the part of the public right-of-way that the public has unfettered access to and an expectation of, access to is changed during that event, than what it is in December.
But it is, to me, it is that change that protects your performers within your licensed areas, as opposed to my daughter who loves to play guitar, who might try and stand outside of Hainani and play her guitar in the walking area. Do you see what I mean? It's that change that protects your performers, not the actual wording here, because the wording is broader to try and accomplish a lot of things.
Because it's not, for the reasons that Mr. Recklow said, the distinction that you'd make is not as clear as would be necessary for it to protect us. It's a nice distinction, but I don't know that it's clear enough. What would be clear is to say, if we have a performer operating within our licensed space, they're not a street performer. That would be clear. And I don't think that it materially increases First Amendment exposure to say that.
Okay, you can have a seat, Mr. Brooks.
Thank
Thanks. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Randy, I've read everything you put out and the ordinance. To me, it's really clear that we're allowing our businesses to play music and not be considered buskers. But when I'm listening to Chip talk, I'm struggling with this because it's almost, we're allowing them to do this within their license agreement. So I'm starting to think that, are there businesses that want to do it outside their license spaces? Is that the issue? Because we're already allowing them to have this and not consider them buskers. I'm really confused.
So, I think there's a couple of ways to look at this, and then I'm going to let Hart talk because he may have insights. But, I think number one, clearly, I don't think the intent of anything that we've done, whether the license agreements, creation of al fresco, or anything we're talking about here, where we're contemplating businesses hiring someone to play music and having that person play music outside of their assigned zone.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, I think you can look at this ordinance two ways. You could look at it which is what I think Mr. Brooks is trying to say is, we have two types of outdoor performers. You have people in one bucket are the people that either the village hired, or people that are sanctioned to play within these al fresco designated areas. And he's saying these folks are not street performers. Street performers are people that are, putting their guitar case down and playing guitar and, getting money or doing it for free or whatever. Another way to look at it is they're all street performers, the ones that Mr. Brooks and some of the other businesses hired, the ones that we hired. However, the ones that are sanctioned or part of a village event are not subject to, the hourly limits, the amplification, the nuisance provisions of this, and because that's really the ones that have significant teeth. And so I'll shut up now, and I don't know if Mr. Passman has any clarification on that or would indicate a legal preference for one of those two paradigms.
Yeah, I'm happy to amplify that and maybe respond to some of the comments made as well. First thing I'll say is I do appreciate the comments made by Mr. Brooks, and as I indicated before in response to Trustee Bertucci's question, if it's the desire of the board to be a little more explicit as to what isn't a street performer, I think there is a way to do it. I've already indicated why we drafted this way, but this is your ordinance, and we want something that you're ultimately comfortable with. The other things I'll say, and this is not to be argumentative at all, but I think it's important to frame, this is a village license, right? The village can grant it and take it away. And so I appreciate that Right now, we are contemplating a scenario in which we have Arlington al fresco. Just as before, in Arlington Heights and in many communities, the idea of a sidewalk cafe has become prevalent and perhaps even expected. But that's not how the law requires village boards and city councils to act. And so you do, and your successors will always have the ability to say no to some or all of this and restore Vale or Campbell or any other street to its traditional use, which is people walking on sidewalks and driving cars and riding bikes down the pavement, and that's it. So that there's the license, the concept is important. This is our right of way. We're going to give it to you for the purposes we say are okay, and then within that, go ahead and do what we've allowed. We do have to be mindful about what we allow in one part of a right of way versus another, simply because it is all still right of way. And again, I've covered that. The last thing I want to say, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify this, Mr. Brooks is right that the language here does have the special event exception for only 2 of the 5 restrictions. The other 3, I think those restrictions exist for pretty important reasons, and I just want to cover them briefly if I can, Mayor and Board. One is the general provision, it's in subsection C of the proposed ordinance, that prohibits street performers from obstructing safe vehicular, bicycle, or pedestrian passage along any street or sidewalk, or ingress and egress between a right-of-way and a building. I would recommend against any exception, and I recognize that the licenses in al fresco program are designed to avoid that in the first place. Staff works very carefully to make sure that a sidewalk cafe or the al fresco area is not one that's going to cause a public safety problem. Nevertheless, I think this is one that we should ask all of our performers, whether you're calling them street performers or buskers or not, should abide by. The second one is similar, a prohibition on the use or erection of tents or other structures in connection with street performance. I don't know how a musician, whether there's part of an existing business or walking the streets, would normally operate. But I think we should, it's the same idea, right? You should not be obstructing or otherwise causing some kind of an impediment to safe passage. And the last one, and this is a deliberate catch-all, and it is also broad and on purpose, is subsection F, which refers to a prohibition on performance that constitutes a threat to public health, safety, and welfare as determined and directed by authorized officers of the village police department. It's our recommendation that, and this, I don't know how this could happen in a licensed area, so I'm not suggesting there's a problem, but if there's something about the manner in which someone is performing that is causing an issue, we should have the ability to address it. And that's not content-based. That's because we're not doing content-based restrictions. That is something about the performance, how it's being performed, perhaps even the where it's being performed, is causing an issue. So that's why those 3 sections don't have the special event exception. But again, going back to my first comment and addressing Mr. Brooks's point, if something more explicit that allows, whether it's someone on a license agreement generally or some other language, something the board wants to see, we can work with that for sure.
Mayor, could I just ask one more question?
Sure.
Could I ask a question to Mr. Brooks?
Sure. Mr. Brooks?
Chip, are you thinking you don't like this because we've already granted you permission to use your performers within your licensed area? Or do you don't like the way it's worded because you're thinking about having them maybe play outside of your designated area? That's where I'm kind of struggling.
No. We only would have our performers. Our license agreement says specifically, if you're going to have outside music, it's got to be for the people in your space.
Right.
So we only have people in our space playing for people in our space.
Right.
Which is why we are exactly not street performers, because street performers are playing for people in the street.
Right. Right.
Our people have to play for people in our space.
Right.
So,
but you're not, are you concerned because maybe they're setting up outside of your license agreement?
Nope. I'm not. I'm only saying our license agreement governs our relationship with the village, and provides all sorts of controls on what we can and can't do.
Right. And that, again, that's where I don't understand it, because we've given you the opportunity to do this. We clearly say in here that it's business with it's not only special events, but it's also things that we've granted. So it seems like it's allowed you to do everything you'd like to do.
This ordinance doesn't say anything about our license agreement.
No, it doesn't, but it says in here, in several locations, events approved by the village, which al fresco, we've approved that, and we've given you a license. So as far as I'm concerned, I think staff is in agreement with that too. You're covered.
Right. I'm just saying, our people are not street performers. There's no reason to have them governed by a street performer ordinance.
I don't think you are, though.
All right, I think we're beating a dead horse.
I would agree.
Trustee Grasse.
If I may just share my thoughts, I do hear and understand that what the vagueness and the reason for that and what is covered, but I also do hear you are asking for a more specific definition of those people who are performing under the licensed al fresco business agreement. And if it would be something that we could include in the definition of street performers to be a little more specific, I would support that if the board would. Because I do hear that also if it wouldn't change what we were wanting to do by this busking ordinance.
Mr. Brooks, you can have a seat.
I actually have one question for
all
Mr.
right.
Brooks. Chip, who is it that who are you afraid of? Are you afraid that the village is going to come after you? You're afraid a resident's going to come after you? Who is it that you're afraid of? Because you're on a mission to get this changed, and I'm not sure for who.
All those are risks. I'm in the business of trying to manage risks, and the village is a risk where we have an intentionally vague structure. That creates risks. Where we have an intentionally vague structure that gives the public an opportunity to create issues where there shouldn't be any issues, that's a risk.
You have a letter from the village manager saying, you are not part of this, number one. Number two, if a resident has a complaint, you go, you know what, I'm permitted to do this, I have a licensing agreement, please talk to the village. I think that you're on a mission to try and solve a problem that's not a problem.
I'm only asking if we're not part of it to say that expressly, rather than to have to rely on something that's not an ordinance.
Do you have a letter that says that you're not part of it?
I have an email that says that it is intended that the special event accept us from those things where the special event is mentioned.
And it copies all the members of the board?
I didn't see that, but
okay.
I think he blind copied people from the board.
Fantastic. I have no other questions.
All right, anything further from the board? Anything from the audience? Anybody else from the audience?
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think I would defer to our village attorney on this, and so I would be in favor of the ordinance as drafted. But I will defer to the will of the board. What is the will of the board? Trustee Baldino.
I would move to approve an ordinance amending Chapter 8 of the Municipal Code of the Village of Arlington Heights regarding street performers.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Any further questions from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Grasse?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Bertucci?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Brooks, for sharing your concern. Appreciate it. We have no other legal business, and so we'll move on in the agenda to the report of the village manager. And in light of recent concerns about from our residents and businesses about safety, especially within our downtown, and in light of our discussion last Monday night on some possible solutions to this issue, I do want to ask the village manager just to give us an update on recent events. I understand, and I've responded to some people who've raised this concern, that there unfortunately is no 100% solution to crime, whether it's in our downtown or greater Arlington Heights or in our country in general. But we can do things to try to alleviate as much of the problem as we can. So with that in mind, we'll ask the village managers to make some comments.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, obviously, this is a community that takes crime and public safety very seriously. And, you know, we have an award-winning police department that works very hard to prevent and respond to any criminal activity and increase the feeling of public safety. We've had a couple of events recently in the underground garage. Both of those incidents were isolated incidents. One we referred to last week, that an arrest was made. There was another one that over this weekend that involved an altercation between two individuals who knew one another. And that individual, the perpetrator, the suspect, was arrested at his home shortly after the event occurred. And so in both cases, law enforcement responded swiftly and brought people into custody that were suspected of the crime. As you mentioned, we did have a lengthy discussion at this meeting about security in our garages in particular back on 1 week ago, and that's something that staff is working very hard on. Some of the things that we talked about were physical improvements, such as the addition of cameras, additional lighting, the lightening up of the facilities, more regular locking of enclosures, and using a public broadcast system to make it less of an attractive place to sleep and hang out. The other thing that we're working on that probably would address some of these issues more substantially is an ordinance that would make it going against village code to engage in anything within our public parking facilities other than parking your vehicle and walking to and from your vehicle. And this would not only cut down on people there that are hanging out, having parties, skateboarding, in those facilities, sleeping, etc. But it also would make it easier for our police department to respond to reports of those things because, many of those items, unless you're catching someone in the act, it's difficult for a police officer to act. Whereas if this type of ordinance were passed, anyone who was down there that just wasn't engaging in parking their car, walking to and from their car, could be treated as someone engaging in trespassing. And so these are all issues we take very seriously. We had a very thorough discussion on Monday. We're refining these things further, and we're hoping to bring them before the village board soon. We've also increased our police presence, as we always do in any area where we're encountering problems. So this is not something that the village is, resting our laurels on at all. We'll respond to these things as they've come up.
Okay, thank you for the update, Mr. Ecklouse. Anything from you other than the request for closed session?
No, sir.
Okay, anything from the board under petitions and communications? All right, Mr. Ecklouse?
I would respectfully request that the board enter closed session per 5 ILCS 120/2C21, discussion of minutes lawfully closed, whether for the purposes of approval of the minutes or the semi-annual review of the minutes, and 5 ILCS 120/2C1, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel.
Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved. Second.
Motion by trustee Scaletta, second by trustee Schwingbeck. Roll call.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Bertucci?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Grasse?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. So we are adjourned into closed session and will not be reporting out. Thank you all for joining us this evening.